Hello and welcome back to Anything Goes, the show where anything goes. Today, Christian and I are going to be reacting to the one and only Jordan Peterson. Now, if you don't know who Jordan Peterson is, you definitely need to look him up. He's
probably been living under a rock if you don't know who he is.
Yeah, that's definitely some facts, because Jordan Peterson is definitely a very smart dude. So, we're going to react to one of his little interview things that he did. So, let's get this thing going. We will stop here and there to discuss what he has said, but let's dive in. Here we go.
The first thing I would say is that I'm not anti-feminist per se. I mean, I think the idea that the world would benefit from the movement of talent from both sexes into the workplace as rapidly as possible is something that anyone with any sense should share, given the the rarity of talent and the necessity for utilizing it. I do stand by my original statement, though, that there's a brand of more radical feminism that insists that our culture is best characterized as an oppressive patriarchy, and I think that, first of all, that's an appalling sociological doctrine, and I think it has very negative psychological effects. And they won't be limited to men, because if it's true that there's something toxic, let's say, about masculinity per se, what that will inevitably mean is that as women adopt more masculine roles, traditionally, what is that toxicity somehow going to go away?
So, this is interesting. He's talking about toxic masculinity and how these feminists think that being like, a strong kind of traditional man is a toxic thing, where really it's really not. He's saying that this masculine image, if you will, is actually very good for the workplace. What do you have to say, Christian? What do you think?
I would agree with it. I just think there should be an asterisk put on that, in the sense that it can be a good thing, but there should also be a discussion being had on men being abusive and abrasive towards women. There's a difference between being a strong figure and being controlling, right?
Right, yeah. And I think for me, I think that the feminist ways, and you guys have probably heard this, is very much so, bashing men for being men. And I just don't think that it's an okay thing to do. It doesn't get us anywhere, honestly, if we're being honest.
No, it really doesn't.
So, let's continue on. Here we go.
But that's a straw man, because no one says there's anything toxic about masculinity per se.
What do you mean no one says that? The term exists.
No,
how is that a straw man? Well, where did the term come from?
It's a phrase that's used about forms of masculinity that are harmful to men and women. It's not about masculinity per se. You must know that.
I read the American Psychological Association guidelines for the treatment of boys and men, and I know perfectly well that this is no straw man. And it's not only devoted towards what you might describe as the more aggressive ends of masculine behavior. It's aimed at masculinity in a much broader range of. There's a much broader range of accusations that are under the surface than that. And so I don't see in what way at all that it's a straw man.
I'm just going to pause that argument for a second and go to Catherine McGregor. And Catherine, I mean, you've lived on both sides of the gender fence. So what are your thoughts on these issues? And just go back to the question that was raised.
I don't know whether that qualifies me or disqualifies me, frankly. Sorry, guys, I ratted on the team, but not for any sociological reason. It was intensely personal. I gather we might address that. But look, I'm not entirely out of sympathy with Jordan's critique. I'm the oldest person on this panel, bar you, Tony, and in my lifetime, I've seen rolling institutional crises through the West. The great American settlement based on Bretton Woods and NATO and the United Nations and so on is fraying globally in the area that I can talk about with some authority. We're seeing a dissolving global order now with the rise of two autocratic totalitarian capitalist states, which is replicating the conditions of the 1930s. And I gather we're not doing the geostrategic stuff, but I think it's very alarming. When Robert F. Kennedy, who was my political hero, was running for the presidency of the United States in 1968, he addressed disenfranchised African Americans who were wearing the backlash from many white men who were losing their jobs or perceiving that they were losing their jobs. The deindustrialisation of the West as jobs are exported to the developing world, all of these factors are... Bobby Kennedy said it wasn't Germaine Greer that said it. He said, when you remove from a man the right to stand before his family as a breadwinner, and people will say that's patriarchal.
That's your minute, by the way. So.
All right, well, I'll shut up. But the removal of meaningful work amongst especially unskilled men has a political consequence. And it's been washing through the American system since 1980 with the Reagan Democrats, the fraying of the New Deal coalition. I don't entirely agree with Jordan's analysis, but the problem can't be gainsaid. And 3 million books later in 50 languages or whatever it is, I bought your book, by the way, and you're outselling Shane Warne. Now, that's a culturally specific reference. That delights me in two ways, because in Australian cricket, no one has more bleached blonde hair or has had more work done than I, but Warne is a close second.
We should put that out on Twitter.
So that's a very interesting thing, isn't it? What did you take away from this?
I agree with most of it.
Yeah.
Much to comment on.
Yeah.
Aside from that beginning, which is probably the most important part of the video.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think people are trying to take out the masculine side of men, and it's going to then lead to... It's just not going to lead to good things, because as I've stated before, we do need men in this world. It's very important to have them. And if we turn men into feminist beings, which feminism is doing right now, we are not going to have a very bright future, I think. And I think that's kind of what Jordan is saying here, is that, we do need those strong masculine figures everywhere we go.
Right. But I think it's also worth its weight in gold of reevaluating what you're saying, in the sense of, we don't want to turn men into feminists, and I don't think that's necessarily the goal. I think people are just confused with what's really going on, and what it is think about it, like, somebody at my age, like, I'm 26, I'm bi, right? Like, I might end up with a woman, I might end up with a guy, only time will tell. But let's play a hypothetical game here and say I end up with a woman, right? The way I live my life, I like to think I could probably hold down and support a family whenever that time comes in my life.
Right.
But by quote-unquote traditional standards of masculinity, I would be viewed as feminine, right?
Yes.
That's really the core of what this whole movement is. It's not trying to destroy masculinity, but just say to men, if you're a girly guy, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that.
Right. Yeah.
Versus the people who say, no, that's wrong. You need to fall in line and act like a real man. It's like, okay, but what is a real man?
Yeah, I guess it would be...
Doesn't boil down to aesthetic, does it?
No, it's
it boils
just...
down to how well can you care for yourself, your family, and your community.
Exactly. Your gender roles is what it is. And some people think men should, lean more towards their old traditional gender roles, and some people think that it's okay for, a man to be a little more emotional, feminine, that kind of thing. So.
Well, I think it's only perfectly human to feel those things.
Yeah, no, absolutely it is. And then, but but back in the day, being an emotional, feminine man was definitely frowned upon. So, and I think that, oh man, I don't know. I think that this world is very much so split between two ideas.
What do you mean by that?
Well, like I said, one part of the world wants men to be traditional, and the other part of the world wants men to be whoever they want to be, right?
Well, I don't think your definition of traditional versus, let's say, non-traditional, basically.
Right.
I, with all due respect, don't think it's a worthy argument. And why that is because think about family traditions, right?
Yeah.
You don't get upset at your relatives or your parents, and your parents don't get upset at you when you practice traditions that you did as a family, like family traditions, but you celebrate in slightly different ways, right?
Sure, yeah.
Like traditional and non-traditional at the same time. That's what I'm viewing as going on right now, because a guy can be quote-unquote non-traditional and feminine and in touch with his emotions and fashionable and able to plan a home and still be a strong quote-unquote traditional man in the sense of taking care of his family and caring for the community. They do not coexist. They do not coexist on two different playing fields. They're on the same field.
Sure.
And the faster people realize that, the faster this will all get resolved.
This will definitely.
I think people are just fighting about nothing, really.
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of stupid that, it's gotten just really ridiculous, and just, I guess you could just say to each their own, right? So.
That's generally what I try to do, yeah.
Yeah, same, because, there are definitely women who do prefer a more traditional man, the kind of leader of the household, whatever. And then there are people who, don't mind a man who, is, what am I trying to say? How would I say it? I guess just a little bit more non-traditional. And I think it's fine either or, whatever you want to be. It doesn't matter as long as you make sure that everything is okay with you and your family, and everyone's happy, and I think that's all that matters.
I think so.
Yeah.